Thanks everyone for joining us for this phone banking training. This is one of two phone banking trainings we're going to do. This one is focused on voter registration, and in the second week of October, we'll be doing an additional phone bank training that is focused on get out the vote. Tori Bray is going to set up our conversation today. So Tori, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Let me just, okay. Hi everyone. So thank you so much for getting on. We are going to be going over a lot of exciting things so that you are prepared to phone bank and to have others phone bank for you as well. So we're going to go over the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign first, and then voter registration and how that affects low-income residents, specifically what's the turnout rate for low-income residents and why do they need to vote. And then we'll be talking about identifying targets in terms of, I think that's in terms of who needs to vote. Is that right, Joey? Okay, and then we'll be going over the script, going over how to record the results of your calls, establishing follow-up or what the next steps are, what are some best practices for phone banking, confronting or dealing with voter apathy, and then next steps. So, so we have been engaging in voter engagement work for quite a while, I think since at least 2012, but this is the first year really that we're doing more in a more engaged process with housing developers. When we talk about our voter engagement efforts, we're referring to looking at voter registration, so helping people get folks registered, helping folks get people educated on what they need to know in terms of how to vote, where they should vote, what they need to bring with them to the polls, who the candidates are, anything you can think of related to the election process and candidates. And then we also focus on mobilization. So how do people get out to the polls, and how can we get folks out to the polls and what they need to think of in that sense. So we're really focused on lower income residents because there's a giant discrepancy when we look at the number of renters that turn out to the polls compared to homeowners. So there's about a 20-point difference when we're looking at renters compared to homeowners. And then there's about a 30-point difference in terms of turnout when we're looking at renters compared to homeowners, and this discrepancy results in a discrepancy or in politicians paying attention to the needs of renters. And we think that if we're going to see policy that really addresses the affordable housing shortage and the needs of the lowest income renters, we need to get folks out to vote so that politicians listen to them and really address the issues that most concern them. And then the public agrees with us as well. So 83% of the public feel that elected officials are not paying enough attention to affordable housing issues. And 76% of the public say that they are more likely to vote for a candidate that has a detailed plan for making housing more affordable.
Thanks for giving that introduction, Tori. I'm going to start in by discussing the meat of why we're here today, which is voter registration, and specifically registering voters who live in subsidized housing and other low-income renters. So who lives in subsidized housing? It's families with children, it's seniors, it's people with disabilities, low-wage workers, sometimes caretakers for family members or loved ones who have a disability. The chart that you see on your screen actually isn't a picture of who's in subsidized housing, but rather a picture of all of the extremely low-income renters in the country. And you'll see that 43% are doing 40-plus hours of work a week of the 40% who are in the labor force, and about half are either disabled or a senior citizen. People who live in subsidized housing have a unique concern. They're concerned about housing quality. They really want to make sure that safety and housing maintenance is a top priority, and that the housing providers who they rent from have the funding needed for property upkeep. They're concerned about the community institutions that surround the housing they live in, the parks, the schools, the libraries. And they're very, very concerned about the stability of their housing and making sure that it can be affordable for a long period of time. But one thing to keep in mind is that subsidized renters aren't voting just for their own needs and interests. They're also very concerned about their friends and loved ones, many of whom they know rely on community supports, and many of whom will be significantly impacted by the results of the upcoming November election. So we want to talk to as many renters in subsidized housing as possible. And who are the best people to carry forward this message? First, neighbors. If you've been following campaign tactics over the last couple of years, there's been a big push on what's called relational organizing and getting someone not just to register to vote, but also to talk to their neighbors or their household about registering to vote as well. Ideally, if you operate in a property where there's a residents association or a tenant union, a strong partnership between a housing provider and a tenant union or a residents association can really move the needle on voter registration and civic engagement. Inviting in community organizations or partners, such as perhaps the League of Women Voters or other nonprofit organizations into properties can be very effective as well. And for housing providers who have resident services staff or property management staff, very often those are the best people to reach out to renters about registering to vote, because it's someone who is familiar to the renter and someone who has a relationship with the renter. The last good option to be registering voters is actual campaigns. I think most of the people on this call or most of the people who watch this recording will be working on behalf of or with a nonprofit enterprise and likely will not want to be associated with any campaigns or political parties. But campaigns or political parties can do voter registration and very often do. They just very often are less trustworthy by the people they're approaching to get registered. I really want to emphasize the urgency of what we're doing right now. Some of the earliest voter registration deadlines are coming up in the next week. And on this slide, I walk you through some of the earliest ones on October 4th, this upcoming Sunday, Alaska and South Carolina. The following day on Monday, it's Arizona, Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana. That's 1 week from today. The following day, Tuesday, October 6th, is New Mexico, and then Wednesday, October 7th is Missouri. Friday, October 9th is a big day because it's Oklahoma and New York. New York, a big state with a lot of voters. And then Saturday, October 10th is Delaware. So just next week, there are 17 states where their voter registration deadlines are going to occur, which means we have about 8 days to make a lot of phone calls and talk to a lot of people about becoming registered voters. So the first thing that matters when contacting low-income renters about becoming voters is using a good call list and identifying targets. One of the things that the National Low-Income Housing Coalition has been proud to be a part of has been providing voter registration lists to housing providers, for-profit, nonprofit, public housing agency, housing providers, so that they know who at their properties is and is not registered. This allows for specific targeting to eligible voters who are not registered, because indeed, one of the most frustrating things about voter registration campaigns is how much time you spend registering people who are already registered, right? The amount of time you have between now and election day, and indeed, the amount of time you have between now and the voter registration deadline is finite. And you want to make sure you're using that time as efficiently as possible. So contact for voter registration only those people who you know are not yet registered. So what we've done is for housing organizations, given them these lists of registered renters, so that those who are non-registered can receive calls from volunteers, like those of you who are watching this recording, or from resident services or property management staff. Everyone using these lists should know that they are entirely renters, and they're living in subsidized housing or they're living in mixed income housing. And I should note that the voter registration list project has been done with a lot of really tremendous help from Jonathan Rose Company's staff and from the good people over at DKPW Inc. So what's on a good list? So we will rely for the calls into housing providers, that the housing providers will put together the call lists, and that the call lists will involve a good contact phone number, the names of all non-registered voters in a given household, a space to record the results of the call, and then opportunity to provide notes for follow-up. So once you know who to call, the next thing to consider is using a script for your call and making sure that you're being consistent with your messaging. Indeed, there are ways to talk about voter registration that will bring better results. One thing you'll want to know is that different housing providers might want to use different messaging. And so if you as a volunteer are being paired with a particular housing provider, they might give you a script that's a little different than what we're about to go over today. The first thing to know about a script is that you want to ask for a specific person in the household. A very common mistake that I see is a phone banker will dial a number and then talk to whoever answers the phone as if they're the person who needs to be registered. It's much better to begin with, "Hi, may I speak with Tori?" or "May I speak with whoever's on your list that needs to be registered?" Because the person who answers the phone might be someone different. You always want to begin warmly and with a friendly greeting. Identify who you are and the organization that you're with so that people know you're with a familiar organization, right? So you might say, "Good evening, my name is Joey and I'm calling with EAH Housing. I'm a volunteer helping some of the residents get registered to vote." After that, you want to take a moment just to remind them of why the election matters and why it's something they should be thinking about. Here's an example. As you probably know, the upcoming election on November 3rd is an important moment for deciding the best path for the future of our community. Support for parks, transit, healthcare, affordable housing, and schools will be decided by the leaders elected in November. In this example, I've captured a couple of things that are really important best practices. Number one, always focus on the future when talking to voting, especially when talking to low-income people. It's really easy for messaging about voting to focus on the past and things that people might be outraged by, but inviting them to consider a new or brighter future will always have better results. Also, it's important to connect their vote to many of the community institutions that they rely upon. In some cases, it might be transit, bus routes, or available health care that they can afford, housing, like where they live, or the schools that their children or that their relatives rely upon. Next, you'll want to be sure that they know you're not supporting a campaign or a political party, and that you're calling just to promote that they get out there and vote. So the next line in our script is, "No matter who you vote for, we really hope you join with your many neighbors and cast a vote." After this, we get into the meat of the call, what we want from them and the action that we would like them to take. Before you ask a person to register to vote during these calls, make sure they know that you know they're not currently registered. Without doing this, one of the most common responses you'll get from people when you ask them to register is they'll say, "Oh no, I'm always registered," or "Oh no, I always vote," right? People take pride in voting, and people sometimes will be ashamed of being a non-voter, so they'll end the conversation too abruptly by saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a voter, I don't need to register." And sometimes they are a voter and they simply only need to update their registration. In some cases, they need to register for the first time. But our calls will be a lot more effective if you take a moment to remind them that you have a list of registered voters and they're not on it, for whatever reason that might be. So question one goes like this. Our records show that you are currently not registered at this address. Can I help you get registered so that you have the option of voting in November? After that, some people will say no, they don't want to get registered. In fact, some people will say no somewhat rudely, and you just got to smile and move on. When people say no, the best practice is to remind them that they can still register even though they're not doing it with you on this call. The example that we have in our script is, "I'm sorry to hear that you're not interested in voter registration at this time. If you change your mind, you can always grab a registration form available in the lobby or at our office, or we can put one in the mail to you," whatever the script calls for with the particular housing provider. The form just needs to be submitted by the registration deadline, which is, you can add the registration deadline. "Thank you so much for your time and have a great day." And that's the entire process of your call when you do it that way. For people who do want to register to vote, if you are calling in a state where voter registration is available, the best practice is to make sure that they register online with you right there over the phone. So the way this works out in our script is, if someone says yes, they're interested in registering, you say, "Excellent. It's easy to register to vote online in our state. Do you have access to the internet at the moment? And if they say yes, your response is, great. Here's the website you should bring up. You give them the website. Or you could just enter into Google online voter registration for Virginia or whatever state you might be in. Let me know when the website comes up and I'll walk you through the form. Before you do these calls, you'll want to know how to fill out the online registration form for whatever state you're calling into. If you're volunteering with a housing provider who has properties in several states, the script and your process will adjust depending on which state you're calling into. And so before calling, make sure that all of the numbers on your list are for a given state. Some immediate guidance for voters is extremely important, and the best approach always involves some hand-holding. You'll note that in the previous example, I didn't say, and once you have the website up, then fill it out. I'm going to go on to my next call. The key thing is to fill out the form with them on the phone. You'll always have better results if you walk people through it. For online registration, staying on the phone with people is extremely important. Let them know that you can walk through the form with them and answer any questions they have. If someone doesn't have access to the internet, or if you're in a state where online voter registration isn't available, you can tell them how to get a paper form. They could pick one up in the lobby, or you can put one in the mail to them. And the key is to then schedule a follow-up call for when you'll call them back once they have their form, and then you can walk them through the form at that time, or perhaps schedule a follow-up meeting. One of the housing providers who will present on our webinar tomorrow is going to share about how they fill out the form on behalf of a voter, because indeed a housing provider already has a person's name, their address, their date of birth, and so forth. And so one housing provider, the community builders in Massachusetts, very often will show up at someone's door with a form that they just need to sign, and the signature is all that's needed. So if you find yourself in a situation where someone doesn't have internet access, or if you're in a state where online voter registration is not available, you would simply direct them to the paper form process. I will get you a paper registration form and then you'll tell them how you'll get it to them. Will it be mailed, or will they pick it up, or will you slide one under their door? Once you have your form, I will call again to walk you through it and see if you have any questions. May I call at and then propose a time? May I call on Tuesday at 7 o'clock and we can go over these questions, or what time would be good for you? You'll just want to make sure you identify a time that there will either be additional volunteer phone banking, or when resident services or property management staff are available for more follow-ups. Finally, the next important part of the script is when nobody answers the phone, and indeed that will be quite often. There are a lot of people in the modern world who don't check their voicemails very often because they rely on text messaging. But remember earlier when I showed you that graphic about who lives in subsidized housing, many of them were seniors, and they very much listen to their messages. So always be in the habit of leaving a voicemail, and doing so succinctly and getting to the point is really important. So here's an example. Hi, this message is for Jim. My name is Joey, and I'm calling with, I'm a volunteer with Volunteers of America. We're hoping all renters participate in the upcoming November 3rd election, and we see that you're not currently registered to vote at this address. Voter registration is simple, and we hope you will register before the voter registration deadline of October 10th. If you would like to register, you can grab a paper registration form outside the office or in the lobby near the elevator. You can also contact a staff member for assistance by calling our office number. No matter who you vote for, we really hope you join with your many neighbors and cast a vote. Have a great day. And that's an example of a voicemail you might leave when doing these calls. So it's important to track call results so we know who is and is not registered and who needs a follow-up call. Approximately, I'd say 60% of the calls you make will not be answered. And so very often calling through the list multiple times can be really helpful. Every call should have one of the following results listed. Either 1, successful voter registration, yay. 2, call back for follow-up. And if you're entering that someone wants a call back for a follow-up, also enter the time and the date when they should be called back. Someone will not register, not interested. They gave you the hard no. And now we get into the dispositions that are going to be most common. First, no answer. It's going to be a very common result. Left a voicemail. Now refused, that's going to, when you see a call sheet that has the RF for refused, that doesn't mean they refused to register to vote. That means they refused the call. That means they hung up on you and were very, very mean. 7 is wrong number. 8 is for a disconnected number. 9 is for someone who moved. If you're calling for, if you're calling for Susan, but Susan doesn't live at that apartment anymore, always try to indicate such on your results sheet. 10 is for a busy signal, and 11 is if you didn't have a successful call because there was a language barrier. If that comes up when making your call, please do list the language the person was speaking if you're able to identify it or if they say it. Establishing follow-up calls is really important when you're talking to people about voter registration. Follow-up calls might need to happen for several reasons. A person needs to be called back to complete the registration when they have access to their computer, which is currently being hugged by the kids, or after they have a paper form delivered to them and slid under their door. Maybe the call came at a busy time because they're in the middle of cooking a very delicate casserole, or because, Monday Night Football just came on TV. More information might be needed before they can finish their voter registration. Maybe they need to look up their driver's license number because that's required in the online form. Or maybe they had a question about whether they're eligible based on criminal history that might be part of their background. But whenever you schedule a follow-up, make sure you do so at a time when somebody actually can follow up, right? If a particular person says, well, I work an unconventional schedule, call me back at 4 a.m. on Wednesday, that's cool. But make sure somebody actually can call them back at 4 a.m. before you go ahead and schedule that follow-up. You might want to do it when resident services or property management staff are available for meetings or calls. And the housing providers who are going to participate in this effort, we're going to ask them to give us blocks of time when their staff will be available for follow-ups. What to do during a follow-up? That's pretty simple. Complete the voter registration process and be sure you have everything you need to complete the registration during that follow-up. If it's a paper registration form, make sure the person you're calling got their registration form, that they have it in hand. If it's internet access, make sure the person you're calling has internet access at that time, or perhaps you've set up a meeting with them so that you can do a safely socially distanced meeting in a place where there is internet, or you're bringing an iPad to them or something of that nature. If you're doing paper forms that need to be signed, make sure you got a pen. Let's talk about some best practices. And the first is connect with people. Smile with your voice. Have a positive tone. This is really important for any telemarketing you're doing, whether you're taking a survey, selling a product, pitching a candidate, or just encouraging people to register to vote. Having a positive phone tone is going to get you very far. You also want to provide space for people to be able to ask questions or offer their own perspectives. Now, that's not built into the script, but people will often want to chat a little bit about voting and what they're thinking about, and you kind of have to get them to that finish line to make them comfortable with registration. I also encourage people not to hurry. We definitely have a ticking clock with voter registration deadlines coming up very quickly, but each vote matters. Take the time necessary to build the trust and rapport that will get you to a place where people are willing to register to vote with you on the other end of that phone line. I wanted to share some information we make available about voting for formerly incarcerated individuals. Many low-income renters are people with criminal backgrounds, and unfortunately, sometimes they have been incarcerated. There's a lot of mythology out there that if a person has ever been convicted of a felony or if they've ever been incarcerated, they can never vote again, when in fact, this is no longer true. The only states where people with felony convictions are permanently banned from voting are Virginia, Kentucky, and Iowa. And actually, I believe I heard that that recently changed in Virginia. There are only 2 states where people with convictions are allowed to vote while they're still in prison, and those are Vermont and Maine. But most states fall somewhere in between those extremes. Most states, you're eligible to vote as long as you're no longer incarcerated, or you're eligible to vote once you've completed the parole or probation period of your sentence. The American Civil Liberties Union maintains a really great resource that you can find online that shows for any given state what the rules are, and that'll help you be prepared if this issue comes up when you're talking to people about voter registration. One of the things that you're going to hear a lot when you talk to people, especially low-income people and low-income renters, is that their vote doesn't matter. When does one vote matter? And with so much happening in 2020, where we've been reminded about the difference in incompetent leadership versus strong leadership, we can point to any number of examples. But the best thing to do, as I mentioned earlier, is to use language that focuses on a better future, connects voting with struggles of a given voter, like what they've gone through in their life, and uses language that refers to a person's civic duty and are they going to stand up for their community. On this slide, I always include an image of one of my all-time favorite posters. This is from the community health vote in Massachusetts. A little kid saying, "I can't vote, but you can vote for me. My future depends on you." And I've always thought this was really strong messaging because it's easy for people to shrug their shoulders about their own life. But when they're reminded that it's about more than just themselves, it's really easy for them to take the step and become a registered voter. And you know, I'm not sure. I think we've decided to rip off this poster and make a version of our own for housing organizations. So I think we'll have a new poster coming along soon. All right, and then my next slide is, oh, sorry. Oh no, I lost it. I lost my screen sharing and I don't know why. Oh, actually, the next slide was just the question slide. So who's got questions, everybody? Any questions from the group right now? Oh. Scrolling through so many slides. There we go. All right, so it doesn't look like anybody has any questions, surely because we were so thorough and comprehensive in our discussion. But perhaps people would benefit from doing a role play of what a call might look like. So why don't we just jump into a call? So Tori Beret will be the person I'm calling. And because I'm simulating a phone call, everyone who is a part of this meeting or watching the recording in the future should know I can't simulate a phone call without doing this with my hand. It is necessary, part of the process. Please bear with me. Hi, is Tori available?
Hello. Yeah, this is Tori. How can I help you?
Hey, Tori, this is Joey Lindstrom. I'm calling as a volunteer with Arlington Partners for Affordable Housing. And we're reaching out to folks today about voter registration.
Oh, wait, how'd you get my number?
Oh, we got your number because I'm volunteering with your landlord, with your housing provider, who has your number, and they are committed to being sure that everyone who lives in their buildings at least has the option to vote. So we're trying to make sure everybody gets registered so that they can vote on election day.
Okay, great. That's wonderful.
You've probably seen that it's going to be a really important election on November 3rd, and this is going to be an opportunity for voters to decide the future of their community as it relates to essential aspects of life, like schools, healthcare, transit, parks, and affordable housing. We currently have it that you are not registered to vote, but we hope that no matter who you vote for, you join your neighbors and cast a vote on November 3rd. Are you interested in registering today?
I'm really confused. I thought I'm almost positive I registered at this address. Is there a way that I can check and verify that?
There is a way that you can check and verify it. I can tell you that if you go to vote.org, you can check that registration status, but I can also tell you the list that we produced is a pretty recent list. And I'll say two things in relation to that. One is it might be the case that you just need to update your registration. There's also been some difficulty with states removing people from voter registration lists. So maybe you were successfully registered in the past, but if you stopped voting for a couple of elections, they might have removed you. And it might also just be an administrative error somewhere by which you were removed from the voter rolls. But one thing I can assure you is that if you update your registration and it turns out my list is wrong and your memory is correct and you are registered to vote, there's no penalty in being registered twice. There's no penalty in doing an update. So there's nothing to worry about with doing it a second time if that's what we turn out to be doing here.
Okay, let's go ahead.
All right, thanks. So I'd like for you to bring up the website to register to vote online. Do you have access to the internet right now?
I do, yes. Give me
Okay.
a second.
So if you could just Google online voter registration in Virginia.
Okay.
And the first thing that should come up right there in Google should be the website for the Commonwealth of Virginia's Secretary of State's office and their online voter registration portal.
Okay, I think I see it. Okay.
Great. And so what you should be seeing right now is an opportunity for you to check your voter registration status by putting in your name, address, and date of birth. Can you do that?
Sure, give me one moment. Okay.
And what does it tell you? Do you need to register?
I do. I need to register.
So click on the button that says register today.
Okay.
And that will take you to a page that invites you to provide some simple information, your name, your address, your date of birth, and then also an ID number from a Virginia State ID or a Virginia State driver's license. You can also use a passport number. So let me know when you're done typing in that information.
Okay, I'm done.
That's great. So at the bottom of the screen, there's a box that you check certifying that all the information that you provided is true and accurate. Can you check that box?
Yes, that's checked.
And once you click submit, you should get something in the mail in about a week or two indicating that you have successfully registered and telling you what your polling place will be on election day.
Great. I am really worried. I'm glad I have you on the phone because I'm really worried that you know, I've been hearing from a lot of people in my building that they're worried about their vote counting, and I'm worried too. And I just don't know if that post office is going to get my, you know, if they're going to get my ballot in time. And I have some disabilities and I can't get myself to the polling place, and I just don't know. I'm worried. I'm real worried. I don't know what to do.
So it's definitely a really difficult election with coronavirus and so many risks at the polling location or in the transit options that might get you to the polling location. And unfortunately, there's been some real questions about the Postal Service. But we believe the Postal Service here in Northern Virginia has been operating really well. And we think that if you put your mail-in ballot in the mail in time, there's really no question that it'll be counted on election day or in the days after if you mail it too close to the deadline. So we encourage people.
What's in time?
So we encourage people to put their ballots in the mail 2 weeks before election day.
Okay.
So that'll be Tuesday, October 18th.
And will I get a stamp? Will there be a stamp on my, I don't think I have enough money to pay for that.
So we're happy to provide postage. You can pick that up in the office near the entrance, or we can put one in the mail to you if that is what you prefer.
Okay, okay. I think that's all I have for questions.
All right, well, thanks so much for taking the time today. We're really excited that you're going to be a part of the upcoming November election because your voice is really important, and we're glad that, that you'll be exercising it in the ballot box.
Great, thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Tori. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So that role play involved the timeless irony of offering to mail someone a stamp, which is always fun. And I also realized I did the whole role play with the phone up to my ear when immediately next to me was my phone that I could have used as a prop. So, you know, there are some ways that role play probably could have been more accurate. But I think that gives people a glimpse of what some of these calls will go like. And I think actually Tori did a good job of demonstrating some of the ways that people will have to go off script and some of the ways that people will just sort of have to adjust as they go. Now,
and I think we should say we have slides that provide information about state by state specific registration and voting information, because I was just thinking some states will send you the ballot with the stamp on it, so you don't have to worry about putting, so if you're in a state where they put the stamp on it, then all you have to say is the stamp's on it, don't worry about it.
Yep.
And then also if people decide that they, in certain states, if they decide that they don't want to vote by mail, they can bring their ballot in person, their vote by mail ballot in person, and then either it will be like, what is it? They'll like, the person will take it and shred it and then give them an actual ballot that they can fill out. So I think, yeah, just, and we have, like I said, we have that information available that we'll be sending out to all volunteers so that they are equipped with that knowledge.
Yeah, and we will make sure to send that out along with the recording of this training. So, any questions at this time? All right, seeing no questions, just a reminder of NLIHC staff support. Myself and Brooke and Tori and Kyle cover the states that you see on this slide, and we are available to help as any of you are working with some of the volunteers who we're connecting to housing providers, or if you're volunteering with a housing provider and you need some additional detail about voting in a given state, we will be ready and available to help.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for this. I think we made a really good recording today. I think a lot of staff and volunteers are really going to benefit from this training, and let's be in touch with follow-up, and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.